Yeah.
That's okay. All right, you're recording now.
Okay, it is April 3rd, 2025. This is a meeting of the Land Use Review Board. I am Janet Hurley, the chair, and we will go around as you appear on my screen. Board members, Sarah, will you introduce yourself?
Sarah Had, present.
Alex?
Alex Weinhagen, board member, present.
Brooke?
Brooke Dingeldine, present.
Kirsten?
Kirsten Sultan, present.
Thank you. Sorry, I gotta find the agenda. Just a moment. Had the wrong one open. Okay. So first on the agenda, other than our roll call, is any updates to the agenda? From board members, any updates, changes to the agenda?
Yes,
Hearing-
Sarah.
Yes. So
Yes, go
I
ahead,
think
Sarah.
on item E, discussion on possible action on meeting procedures, that is just going to be discussion. We will not be a decision point on that.
Okay, thank you. And Alex, did you have your hand up too?
Well, I just wanted to clarify that that agenda item says discussion of meeting procedures, but my understanding is that's not what we're talking about for that item. We're talking about the draft rule for board member removal. No.
So we will be talking about meeting procedures generally, which includes some of that background information that was provided with the packet. But again, I think what the board received is relatively new and there's going to be no decision point. So that is all inclusive of what you received, Alex.
Right, and those aren't final drafts or anything, but they're just starting points for discussion. Anything else on the agenda? Okay. Moving on to opportunity for public comments on non-agenda items. I see Thomas is shaking his head, meaning he has none.
Correct.
Caroline, do you have comments that you would like to offer?
I do. Thank you so much, Janet, Peter, and all members of the Land Review Board. Should I just dive into it?
Sure, go right ahead.
Thank you. So my name is Caroline Sherman Gordon, and I'm the Legislative Director of Rural Vermont, a small farmer-led nonprofit that's been around for 40 years. I'm here today to ask for your support and efforts to establish a requirement in law that would request the Senate to mandate regional planning commissions to issue future agricultural land use maps when they revise the land use sections of their regional plans. This is one of Rural Vermont's requests to be amended in one of the miscellaneous bills that are in the Senate, either the Environmental Subjects Bill or the Agricultural Miscellaneous Subjects Bill. To be amended to include this mandate for regional planning commissions to issue future agricultural land use maps. As you might know, our RPCs will revise the land use sections of their regional plans this year to implement Act 181 of 2024 and other land use laws that passed the legislature in recent years. I am a commissioner on the Two Rivers Ottauquechee Regional Planning Commission and know that this is an opportune moment. TORC is Vermont's largest regional planning commission and will work with all 30 towns to do their land use revision. And I just know that in the current version of the future land use maps, agriculture is not on the map. And I also know that because Vermont has this historic settlement pattern in which we want to develop the state, that pattern actually follows where farms have settled historically. So also we will, because of that, develop then the best agricultural soils as we've planned for affordable housing. And protecting farmland is, I think, as much of a public interest as affordable housing, yet it is a void in these planning laws that passed and that are going to be implemented this year. So taking farmland and food security as projected by the New England Feeding New England 30 by 30 goal into serious consideration for the upcoming land use revision is really important goal. And I really hope for the review board's support and making sure that's going to be a statewide mandate so that we can really generate on the basis of these recommendations, which these regional plans are, the data we need to advance also our policy considerations on how to better protect farmland from development, plan for food security, and make farmland more affordable to farmers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Caroline. And Caroline reached out via email, I think it was yesterday or the day before. And we had a little exchange when I explained to Caroline that the board took an earlier stand that we were not going to insert ourselves into the the policy machinations this session. We were focused on getting the processes in place for implementing what was already passed in Act 181. That doesn't mean that we don't support that notion that there should be, more specific planning around agricultural lands. And some of us have attended various events and meetings where we are hearing very similar feedback that it seems that ag soils and agricultural lands and in particular are starting to fall through the cracks with these new changes. So we hear you, Caroline, and thank you for coming today to share your thoughts.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? I don't see, since Thomas shook his head, I don't see any other public, so I guess we can move on to consent agenda item, review and approve the March 24th and the March 27th minutes. So would anyone like to propose a motion regarding those minutes?
Yes, I'll propose that we approve both sets of minutes pursuant to any minor revisions that we discuss with this
Okay.
motion.
Thank you, Alex.
I'll
Happy to
second.
second.
Nope. I'll defer to Kirsten.
Kirsten seconded. Any discussion or corrections to offer for those two sets of minutes?
They were economical. Well done, Brooke.
Great. Okay, then I think I can ask for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That is all 5 members of the board voting to approve both sets of minutes as noted on the agenda. Okay, so next item, moving right along, discussion and not possible action and no possible action on meeting procedure information that we shared with the board. So, Sarah, do you want to go ahead and introduce this?
Absolutely. So I think where this began a while ago was the feeling of trying to solidify some of the meeting procedures that we had developed and looking ahead to the need for the board to have procedures and protocols around public hearings and approvals for the tier 1s regional plans. We were hoping to go with meeting guidelines that we could easily adopt without going through the rulemaking process. But the more that we dived into it with Rebecca, there are pre-existing procedural rules for the previous NRB that date back to 2006 that really are the ones that are meant to govern meeting procedure. These are completely outdated at this point. They refer to the land use and water panels and are in need of updating. So I think after Janet and I had a discussion with Rebecca, the tact that we would like to take is in updating the procedural rules from 2006 to better meet the board's current needs and to also use it to address the requirement that the board has about putting in a procedure for board removal. So we're hoping to combine all those things together into one big effort to update the procedural rules. We want to recognize that this might not be something that we're able to accomplish before we actually have to hear the first regional plans. And if we need to, we'll work with Rebecca to get guidance for the board to operate under. But the correct thing to do is to go back and update the procedural rules, which was what you did get in your packet, was the procedural rules, as well as some of the language that we're looking at for from the Green Mountain Care Board about board removal. And so that's sort of going forward to the TBA on it in terms of timeline. We have so many other things right now. We're going to be discussing prioritization at a future meeting, but just wanted to give everybody sort of an update as to where we're at and welcome thoughts.
I just want to note that the only of these documents that made it to the website was the draft removal for cause. So the old rules aren't on the website, and
Yes, they,
we
well, they're
That's
not with the agenda.
Not true. The rules, the NRB rules of procedure are posted on the website, and I did include a link to that in the email, and they are available on our website
Well,
already.
correct. The old rules are, but the drafting that Sarah and I had worked on didn't make it.
So that's my fault because I didn't ask for that to be put up
Oh,
because
okay,
at this point
okay.
it's so far out of line with so I think what I was going to do is everybody got sort of a peek at the guidelines that we're thinking of, putting a hard hold on that, because I think part of what Rebecca has to do for us is to look and see if we can simply repeal the rules that we have and start anew, which is what that previous document would indicate, or if we have to work within the confines of amending the existing rules. And the thing that I think Rebecca, and this is why I specifically didn't want to have that posted, is once you begin the rulemaking process, you have to document every little thing and why you're doing it. And so I didn't want to get the cart out before the horse
Okay.
any further than Ari was.
I
Um,
forgot that we had this discussion about that.
There's so
Sorry.
many moving parts, aren't there?
But we did share that at some point, didn't we, with the board?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, that's the idea, is incorporating those ideas into a rulemaking process. And because we have to do, because we are mandated to establish rules for removal, I had found these Green Mountain Care Board proposed rules for removal a few weeks back and thought, well, this would be a really easy way to start the rulemaking process. It looks pretty applicable to the Land Use Review Board. And so, yeah, we would appreciate the board looking at that draft Green Mountain Care Board removal for clause rule and, you know, mulling over whether it is appropriate for this board, and then let Rebecca help us with the merging of all of these ideas.
Janet?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. So a couple of questions. One, it sounds like Rebecca's gonna sort of take the lead on this overall effort. Which board member is going to be sort of the liaison with Rebecca? Is that you, Sarah, or is that you, Janet, or is it both of you, or it's Sarah? Okay, great. So, second question, do you want any conversation today on any or all of these documents, or is
Sure.
it just premature and we just want to acknowledge that
No, I
they
think-
exist?
I think that where I was going to go with this too is, sure, comments absolutely. However, if you take a look at the 2006 rules, there's so much there that's outdated. Let's not spend too much time on that and just
Right.
sort of agree that that needs a whole go through. So, yes.
I
Yeah,
totally agree. I took a quick look at the 2006 rules and immediately stopped reading because it looked like they were so far out of date as to be almost unusable. So I think that question you posed that Rebecca should answer for us is a good one. Do we just repeal and start fresh, or do we try to somehow revise, which seems fraught? But the documents I spent more time looking at were the other two. And Janet, I don't know if we're looking at two different documents. The document that's up on the website for this meeting regarding draft of a possible removal, a rule regarding removal of a board member, that has the land use review board in it. It like it doesn't
Right.
say Green Mountain Care Board. It's been tailored to
just
us.
just by inserting land use review board, and I think I had suggested a couple more causes for removal that that Rebecca worked in. So those are so it's essentially what the Green Mountain Care Board has put forth for rules. And I
Gotcha.
don't know, I only found it in draft form on their website, so I'm not sure where they are in the rulemaking process. Maybe that's something Rebecca can find out for us, but
Yep. I'll
it
just
seemed like a why reinvent the wheel kind of thing. It's something we have to do, and it seemed fairly straightforward to me. But I'd love to hear what you think about it, Alex.
Yeah, so I'm happy to defer to Rebecca, but I'll just
Okay.
say I have maybe one or two initial comments, but having only had a chance to look at it since yesterday afternoon, I haven't had time to, give it the full
Yeah.
treatment that it deserves. But I do have a couple of thoughts, but again, I'll defer to Rebecca.
Yes, it's just one technical point, and I just wanted to, so the changes I made from the Green Mountain Care Board draft was to update it to say the Land Use Review Board. I also went through, and where it mentioned specific statutes to the Green Mountain Care Board, I went and put ones that I could find that seemed to match from our own statutory construction, because we do have a whole ethics section. So I put that into the purpose. So that's an addition there from that content. But everything else is in structure. And then where it talks about the reasons for removal, that's where I believe two other items were added to the very end. So, but everything else is just from the Green Mountain Care Board's model. So it's just, and nothing, right? It's all just draft. So it's just a mechanism to get the conversation started.
Yep. Kirsten.
So I'm interpreting that this was a draft that the Green Mountain Care Board is or was considering, but it's not the final version that they've perhaps adopted. Has anyone looked for a final version?
Yes, that's what I was just saying. I don't know where they are in the rulemaking
Oh,
process.
okay.
This is all I found on their website, and I asked that maybe Rebecca could find out for us
Okay,
where they are in the process.
okay.
Yes, I'll do
Thank
that.
you. That would be of interest. Can I ask which factors were added?
Do you remember?
Yeah, let me just
Rebecca,
open it
what
up real
okay.
quick. I don't have it in
Yeah.
front of me. Just give me
Okay.
1 second.
Might have been C was added,
So so it's in,
and maybe a little
Yeah.
bit more detail in F.
right. So what was added, and so I'm looking at section 7.201. And then subsection C, what was added was after board, for example, missing 3 board meetings without notice could be a reason, right? So do we want to give specific examples? And then D, E, no, so that was C. And then D was already there. And then E, F, G, and H.
Oh, okay. I guess I had more than 2.
No, maybe you didn't though. No, because I think the violations of state or federal law or violations of Vermont personnel policies and procedures were there already. So I think I just, just felt like the
Yeah.
E with the violation of established policies of the board. It just made sense based on the
I mean,
order. Yeah,
if
so E
you're-
and F
if
are the
you're-
new ones.
If you're that
Sorry.
interested, you can look at the Green Mountain Care Board website. That's where I found it. And as we just said, we don't know where they are in this process and whether that was adopted as rule or what. So. There is some funny numbering. They refer to internal sections as 8. Oh, I think you fixed that, didn't you, Rebecca?
Yeah, I
To
that
fix
I
it.
forgot about
Yeah.
that part. Yeah, I did because they had
Yeah.
some when they referenced the rules, like within the rules, they would have said like 8.201, but there was no 8.201. It really was 7.2. So I had updated that so the sites actually went to a particular part of the rules
Right.
that you have before
Right.
you. Proposed
Right.
rules.
Right.
Yep.
So, yeah, so this is just a starting point for discussion. Go ahead, Alex.
Thanks for finding it. It's super helpful to have something to start from and a straw man to sort of tear apart and put back together than it is starting from whole cloth. So I appreciate the effort and finding it and at least reworking it so I can read it and it makes sense to me from our board's perspective with the right board name. The initial thoughts I had were it's too long, it's too detailed. So that was one. That's not very helpful, but that was just my initial sense. It's like, oh my goodness, this is an awful lot. And then more specifically, it looks like the vote to remove a board member by the other board members is just by a majority of those members. So for our board with 5 members, if I did something untoward and was up in front of you for consideration of being removed, it would only take 3 out of the 4 remaining board members to eject me. I'm happy to talk about it more but I kind of feel like it should be unanimous. I think it's a pretty big deal to remove a board member. And for those of us who Janet and Sarah in the municipal world, I think that's how it works for a planning commissioner or zoning administrator. I forget what it is, but it requires like unanimous vote of the select board. I think that would be appropriate here.
I agree with that, Alex.
And then the last thing, and again, I just haven't had time to fully, get my head around this, so we'll talk about it more, obviously. A little leery of the role that legal counsel for the board is playing in the process of adjudicating this issue. Again, that's not super helpful, not very specific, but it just something stuck there for me. Like
Do you
being
have a
here-
highlighted clause that you can point out, Alex?
Yep. Let's see here. It wasn't so much that legal counsel would serve as a hearing officer.
Oh, okay.
That doesn't bother me so much, I don't think. Where is it? I guess
Is
it's
it
in.
301C? Or it's 301? The chair in consultation with legal counsel and the Department of Human Resources
Yeah, it's
and the chair in consultation with legal counsel and consistent with state and federal law may.
I think it was more in 302.
Okay,
That the chair shall direct legal counsel to do a bunch of things. And sorry, I'm just going to riff on this because I don't have the section references. Yeah, I seem to remember that the chair engages legal counsel unless the
Yeah.
chair is the one who has the complaint against them,
Right.
in which case it's the vice chair. And at that point, the legal counsel conducts an investigation of some sort and then brings in the chair and one other member of the board, and some kind of decision is made as to whether this is actionable. And then if it's not, it's sort of, there's a record made, but it doesn't go anywhere, doesn't come to the full board. And if it is actionable, then it comes to the full board. I guess what I was thinking was like, we're a fairly small board and this is a big deal. So as much as we don't want to have a board member impugned unnecessarily or improperly, and I think it's okay for the full board to hear about the complaint at the get-go and, you know, be updated on it, as opposed to having just the chair and one other board member and legal counsel be involved. That seems awkward to me.
Yeah. Seems reasonable. Sarah, what do you think?
So I think if we go with Alex's route, that solves one of my. So I think there are a whole bunch of things in here that we're going to need to iron out as we go through them. And one of the things I sort of chuckled at as I looked at that section was the longest tenured board member, which right now it's sort of like eeny, meeny, miny, mo. We're all the same. You know, I can see particularly with, so here's the sort of bigger picture is usually there's HR. There is a legal process with an HR person that this is their wheelhouse to go through and sort these things out. We are not that. And so I saw legal counsel as being involved is to basically make sure that they're keeping the board and the state safe. Because this is someone's losing their job, they're being terminated, and is going to be an outward public sort of process. And this is the one chance for there to be some inward process of, you know, just before we get to the whole rest of the board, maybe there can be a quieter, smaller process, so that, you know, if somebody came out with Alex's untoward behavior, was he left paper clips lying all over the floor of 10 Baldwin, and I tripped and I fell. Well, is that really a removable cause? Or is that like an awkward, oops, sorry moment? And there should be some sort of level of censor in this process where the wheat is taken from the shaft and the ones that really need to go forward should go forward, but the ones that are maybe personal or not belonging in this process are weeded out. I don't know what that looks like. I'm willing to sort of like let Rebecca look through and see if there's other things that we can look at. I agree that we are small, but at the same time, I hope that we can be thoughtful and humane and also looking to be legally astute in this.
Brooke.
Yeah, I haven't, I mean, I have read through this a couple times, but I really haven't studied it to really come up with a conclusion. But the things that jumped out at me were there seemed to be no specification of notice of evidence that would be presented against the person, and due process, I think, not only requires notice of a hearing, but you have to be given the information beforehand. It's sort of known as like the Loudermill standard, I believe, if I go back in my memory banks. But
Yeah.
And in terms of two things, one is I think this is patterned after a different board who has the chair that's, you know, kind of in charge of everything. And so I think there is that issue of we're supposed to be a board as one versus having the chair making decisions, consulting with legal counsel, and just doing things instead of having the whole board involved in that. The other issue that concerned me is that legal counsel, if it's within the program, technically are employees or in a just below level of the governance structure, and I don't think it's appropriate to have an employee acting as legal counsel about their boss's position. So if we could like automatically go to the outside counsel or HR counsel,
Or
something like
AG or
that.
somebody, yeah.
Yeah. And then, I'm unclear. There's lots of talk about confidentiality, like in the beginning part, and then it talks about an administrative hearing. But, and then, we've been discussing like a public process. I think we need to understand like what the privacy protections are around employees. My recollection is like if you have one of these hearings for, I think it's municipal employees, it was like private unless the employee wanted it to be public, I think. So I just need to have a better understanding of what it means to have this administrative hearing and to make sure that we have those protective guardrails to make sure that, even if we're not classified employees or whatever, that we do have those due process protections or privacy options.
So, yeah, there is, the board shall ensure that confidentiality is maintained throughout the disciplinary process in accordance with state and federal law. But it sounds like you're also suggesting that the accused board member or could also want it to be a public process.
Well, all I'm saying, I think that's my recollection.
Yeah.
Like they have the privacy unless they don't want it or something.
Exactly. They might not want it to be. They might want the public to see that they're being railroaded out of the board or something, right? So,
And then-
yeah, I think those are good points.
Then there was just one issue that I was a little uncomfortable with on the factors.
Yeah.
The very bottom one, H, and this is in section 7.202. The last one is like any other factors the board determines are relevant. And to me, that's like, why do you even list all the other ones before it? It's like whatever we
Whatever the
think.
board says is relevant. Yeah.
I felt like that one is a little bit too open-ended and
Yeah.
doesn't give fair notice to
Yeah.
anyone of what the process is.
Yep.
But that's what I discerned from my review.
Thank you. Sarah, you have another thought or two?
I was just going to thank Brooke for very thoughtfully articulating where I was trying to say in terms of legal process and what have you. So thank you, because that's exactly what, as I said, you more thoughtfully articulated than I could. I think the other thing that I'll just throw out as I was listening to Brooke and thinking too was to that initial process. We love you, Janet, but what if it is the chair that we need to remove? That's also not contemplated, and another factor of where the Green Mountain Care Board might be different. And so that's just another thing to explore. I don't know if it was contemplated, if we could or should, or if that's something that we need to address.
You mean getting rid of the chair? I think that should be an option, just as,
Included
and I
in the
think
language, Sarah.
if it's the chair, then it go, then the vice chair takes the responsibility of the process, So are you saying that was clear in this, Alex, or not?
It was clear to me. I believe there's
Yeah.
language in this version that indicates that if the chair is who the complaint is about, then the vice chair steps up and follows the
Yeah.
same protocol that the chair would have otherwise.
Right. Is that what you were gonna say, Brooke? Okay. So Rebecca,
Yes.
do you feel like you have some direction to make a few edits here?
I do. So what I'll do is
Okay.
I'll incorporate what I've heard today to the extent that I can. The ones that I can't quite fit in at this point, I'll just record so we don't lose those as we try to figure out what we want the document to look like at the end.
Okay. And before Kirsten has her hand up, so Go ahead, Kirsten.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say that I have had a chance to read through this, but I don't really feel like I've fully digested it, so I'll offer some sort of preliminary comments. I agree with everything that's been said. I had also myself kind of thought about that I think it should be unanimous it shouldn't just be 3 board members, but 4. And I was also wondering, have we consulted with HR? I don't know if Rebecca's done that or if they've been
Not yet.
looped in, because this document does refer to HR.
Yeah,
So I think we
we'll-
should coordinate with them, like with,
Yeah,
like, just make
absolutely. And I think as Rebecca sort of investigates where the Green Mountain Care Board is in their process, she may learn, whether they consulted HR, how much of this is sort of standard for state boards across state government here, and that sort of thing. Don't you think, Rebecca, that would be something you might uncover as you look into where they are with this?
Yes, absolutely. So as part of the rulemaking process, before we can even get it so that we can file it with ICAR, we have to share it with our government partners. So as soon as we mention another part of the government, we have to give them a copy and we have to find out, like, do you have the capabilities? Is this actually what you can help us with? And then to what extent? So it will be something we'll vet just through that process, but it will be something I'll do early on, just because why put the time into something and then to find out, oh, wait, this isn't even an option we can use.
Right. Alex.
So just procedural question. Is it your sense, Sarah, Janet, Rebecca, that this belongs in a larger rules of procedure document like the 2006 version updated? Or that because it's outlined as a to-do item for us specifically in statute in Act 181, do you think that we should do this first?
So initially, that's what I thought, but as we talked with Rebecca about this, it seemed like maybe it should be folded in with rules of procedure that, we need to replace what we have anyway. So we were going to let Rebecca do a little more work on this and make a recommendation to us on that.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. Thanks.
Okay, anything else on this item?
does that include the work on rules of procedure? Or are we just talking about this removal for cause?
No, we're talking about all of it. So if you have comments on procedural rules too.
yeah,
or
so-
guidance.
Thanks for explaining the bigger picture on the rules of procedure component. This might sound like kind of a dumb question, but is it the goal for the rules of procedure that those would apply to like board meetings? I'm looking to understand which ones, like all of them,
Sure.
including, we do have some quasi judicial
Yep.
responsibilities. So are we trying to do one sort of catch-all?
Yes, is the answer. So
Okay,
we
so,
have various types of meetings. We have regular
Yes.
meetings, we have special meetings, we can have emergency meetings, we have hearings that we need to hold for regional plan approval processes or regional plan approvals, tier 1Bs, tier 1As. We have all these new kinds of the board will need to partake in. And so they would be described in a document like this. And
okay, so we're trying to
and-
do it as a catch-all for all, like, all the different categories, but some of those procedures might vary a little bit depending on the type of meeting.
Yeah.
And then would we envision that this updated procedure would capture meetings that are not subject to open meeting law, like they're, trainings and like agenda setting meetings, those kinds of things that are not subject to open meeting law? Are we I would envision that would not be governed by this procedure.
Right.
Okay.
I would too. We're not gonna.
Okay, I'm just
That's just-
confirming kind of lay
That's
of the
just
land.
work. That's just
Okay.
work. Yeah.
Yeah, I
We're
agree.
not- Yeah, so. Anything else? from anyone? Brooke?
So on the meeting procedural rule document, I just wanted to mention a couple things. If we're using open meeting law or statutory language, like we're referring to that, I would suggest either referring to like the citation or the law, or cutting and pasting the actual language from the open meeting law into the procedure. My concern is sometimes when language is restated to either summarize it or make it more readable, it can be argued that you've changed the law or the rule or the language from what you were referring to. So just for sake of consistency and making sure we don't alter the expectation to something else. If we're going to refer to that, I would prefer to see the cut and paste if you want all the information in one document. I don't think it is useful to say, oh, there's this law that applies, go look at it, when you're in a that kind of thing. And then on Robert's rules for the small boards, I think I've never read it, and I read a summary of it on the internet, and the premises sound totally reasonable, but I think we need to still figure that piece out in terms of how we utilize them. Are we allowed to, and that kind of thing. But again, I would argue to try to get a complete document so that it's one-stop shopping. I think that that's very helpful.
Yeah, and just to respond to the Roberts Rules thing, I spent a lot of time trying to find, a document that outlined Roberts Rules for small assemblies, and I couldn't. And there are some summaries that various people have put together, but those aren't they. And so Sarah, I think, located a copy of the new 12th edition of Roberts Rules, and somewhere in there are the rules for small assemblies. But I haven't looked at it yet. Have you, Sarah?
Yes, and it's less than a page.
Okay.
And so it's one page out of like many.
Yeah.
So that's something to look at and incorporate. And I think to Brooke's point, from what I gather from Rebecca with rulemaking, any single little change needs to be explained as to why, and there's going to be a lot of Vermont ICAR precedent behind that. So I think Rebecca's getting our shopping list together, but there's going to be a lot of other rules and guidelines effectuating what we can and can't adopt. So I'm trying to keep this as flexible as possible, realizing what we're walking into and what we're all hoping for. And I have faith that Rebecca will help cook it all together for us, but it's going to take a bit. So to be continued.
Yeah, and sort of following what Brooke said, it might be because I think that one-page summary within the 1,000-page Roberts Rules latest edition, I think that one page refers to a lot of stuff in the rest of the book. And yeah, it says it modifies the rules of large assemblies. And so there's by reference a modification of a bunch of other pages of that book. And I was thinking about this the other day. It might make sense for us to just not even reference Robert's Rules, but just decide what are the rules for this small assembly. So, and we can use Robert's Rules for guidance in developing those. Alex, you're next.
So if you didn't see my thumbs up, just repeat that. I agree wholeheartedly, Janet. Especially if it's just a page, let's just take what we want out of it and stop referring to an old English document that nobody can find and nobody wants to spend the money to buy the 1,000-page tome. But my other comment was going to be, it might be a lot easier if we just repeal these rules of procedure and adopt guidance or meeting protocols in their place that are not rules, that do not need to go through the rulemaking process, and then adopt formal rules just for removal of board members, because we are compelled to do that in Act
Correct.
181. So I'm going to leave it to you ladies
Yeah.
and Rebecca to figure that out. But I really encourage you to ponder the possibilities of a shortcut, which is just jettison the 2006 rules of procedure and rewrite what we want, not as rules, but as guidance or procedures that don't have to go through rulemaking.
Yeah. Thank you, Alex. Brooke?
Share my screen for a minute, because I want to show you the, it's just a 2-pager that's sort of the summary of the, of Robert's rules. And can you guys see that?
Yep, got it.
Okay. So it's the kind of thing where, it just basically lays out the different principles that, you know, it's trying to accomplish. And, I think it's a really good summary so that we don't, you know, need to like adopt the actual language, but I'm sure, I mean, Rebecca's done such a fantastic job already, and it's like, I totally trust her to look at the provisions that we, you know, we can check off the ones off the list and say, you know, we want to make sure that this is how we do it. Of course, our chair gets to vote, you know, don't do it like Robert's rules on that. And you know, not that I want to lump lots more work on her, but yeah, I think maybe this might be a good guideline to kind of look at and figure out if we have our own language that we can just develop. I'm happy to help in any way in that regard.
Brooke, where did you find this one?
Just off the internet. I'll have to look and see.
I mean, we can take from it what we like and discard what we don't, I suppose, and not worry about having to reference it. So,
Yeah, because it's not, this is, I think it was off a law firm site, maybe. It was
Okay.
kind of just somebody that was saying, here's the main ideas behind these rules.
yeah. Can you share that with Maddie and we can get it out to the full board?
Sure, will do. And I'll double
Okay.
check where I got it from so we have the internet reference.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
All right, any more on this topic? Looks like maybe not. Okay, we're a few minutes late on discussion and possible action on tier 1. Are we ready for possible action? Sarah? Today, you think?
So I might turn off my camera because you guys are getting very choppy.
Okay,
My apologies.
that's okay.
Can you hear me all right?
Yep, and we still see your pretty picture.
All right. So I'm going to ask for action to be delayed until April 21st.
Okay,
I would like to have some discussion and follow-up from last Thursday's meeting.
yep,
So with
Right.
that being said, I'll walk you through some of that.
mm-hmm,
So following that meeting, I put out requests to A&R, specifically on the rare threatened and endangered species and significant communities portion, and also to Division for Historic Preservation on the character of the area requirements. And that's something I'm hoping to get back from them for the 21st. But I would like to use this time to walk through some of the other modifications and as well as continue with any questions or comments the board might have overall. So with that being said, is everybody okay if I try and share my screen?
go right ahead.
All right. So you have the guidelines in front of you, the original memo. I made some modifications, which is what was circulated and put on the website. And I highlighted in green the first criteria that we have to go through about confirmation from the relevant regional planning commission. It seemed like could suffice for compliance with this criteria, which is a municipal plan is approved. The other
do you want-
area,
Sarah, are you asking for board feedback on that right now?
well, I think with A and B,
Uh-huh.
it seems like there was tacit approval from the board that these are okay things to roll with. But yes, I would ask for your feedback on A and B now together.
Okay, I'll just say that having been part of the confirmation process for municipal plan approvals at the regional level, it's pretty rigorous. I don't know why we would not take that as evidence of a confirmed plan that is approved in accordance with statute. Anybody else have thoughts on that? Brooke?
Just a question. So is approval, does that indicate that the town was deemed in compliance with the regional plan? Town plan
Yeah, that's
was?
part of it. Yeah. Now it's part of it.
'Cause
So,
I've seen it like as a separate approval or what have you, and I didn't know if that was like part of what we're defining here. You know, if it's approval, if that's part of it. So I'm
it's
good.
not, so what the, when the regional, when a town plan is adopted, it then, goes to the regional plan for this confirmation of conformance with statute. And that includes, it has to be compatible with surrounding town plans and with the regional plan. It's very similar to what you're going to be seeing, or, in the fall for these regional plans. There's this pretty extensive checklist that comes in with the municipal plan that gets put in front of the regional commission. Usually regional planning staff read the municipal plan and go through this checklist and indicate, where in the plan this particular requirement is addressed and how it's addressed. And it's very extensive. And I think it would be an enormous waste of time for us to be recreating that process.
But maybe
For
more
the
importantly,
Q&A.
we're not authorized to. A is specifically that the plan is approved in accordance with 24 VSA 4350. That's what's in 4350 is the regional plan confirmation. So we don't have the authority to do more than that for the plan. So we just need a letter from the Regional Planning Commission saying, yep, it's confirmed per 4350, done.
Yeah.
Kirsten?
Well, yeah, so I'm interpreting that the board is to verify, yeah, as you are all saying, the existence of the plan. And maybe this sounds like a silly detail to note here, but for me, I would hope that the letter from the RPC would also encompass like the date of the plan, like what's the date of the plan that they're referring to. I mean, I expect they would,
Yeah.
but just some, so we have a record of this is the plan, here's the date when it was adopted.
Yeah.
Right. So I think these were the two easy ones. I'm going to move on because they get a little bit tougher. I want to make sure that we have some time to get to those, but we can always come back. So C is that the municipality has adopted flood hazard and river corridor bylaws. And so what I was proposing is when you can't exclude these areas from your tier 1A area, that you have to provide evidence that you've adopted flood hazard bylaws and river corridor bylaws. And right now there's the ERAF list, which is kept of the towns that have done this and adopted the flood hazard and river corridor bylaws. My question and ask of ANR, because it's not really clear how and when this list is updated. And so I don't want to put a community in a spot where they're not on the list, but they're eligible to be on the list. I don't want to create more work from ANR than they need to, but I think that, so this is something that I've put out to ANR to say, is there a list that you feel comfortable with delegating this to for sort of a self-check, and also possibly having the small need to maybe certify for some of these communities that might be more recent adopters and aren't necessarily on the list. The other method that we could go by, which I didn't think the board was as much in favor of, was a self-certification where a community could say, yep, we've done it. So I think what I got from the board was you're going to look for some sort of verification from some sort of entity, whether that's the ERAF list or ANR, if I have that correct.
And then, so the question, Sarah, would be if it's recently adopted, how long would it be before the ERAF list would be updated to include it?
No
You-
one
you-
could tell me.
Okay,
So that's why I think I want to be very recognizable, because I think something that we heard in one of our first meetings with ANR was that they also do not have more staffing or more funding to be able to help us. And so if we're able to use some of their existing processes to do this, that would be preferable. We can't cover all bases. There might be some outliers, but my hope is to
what's,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, no, finish.
My hope is to give them the space to let me know what they feel comfortable with, what
Yeah.
list they feel comfortable with, and also if they do want to have or retain that comment on somebody that's maybe not on the list or was on the list but perhaps shouldn't be, that sort of nature.
Do you anticipate that there are going to be any to how many tier 1A applicants who don't already have these two minimum standard flood hazard and river corridor bylaws in place?
So I'll just quickly walk you through that. I see Alex has his hand up, but maybe I'll try and answer something that he might have along the way. So within the state of Vermont, if you're a community that's adopted floodplain regs, there is a cycle where the state will come and have a session with you and go through your regulations and see if you're meeting the state's minimum and offer you comments and have a conversation if you're not, and they might propose some changes too. Because the state standards are changing as are federal standards, and there's a cycle, but there isn't a real timeline on that cycle. Like they don't
Right.
have like, we'll get to you every 5 years or something of that nature, but they do get to everybody. And so that's something where the ERAF appears to be the sort of amorphous warehouse of towns that have at one point in time submitted something to go onto it, but maybe not been verified by the flood people to be in current compliance with current state minimums. So I want to be cognizant of that. And I think now under, is the new act that passed this past year 121, Act 121, that they will be being more proactive that way.
The
So
state
if
will-
there isn't a list, there probably will be a list in a cycle where they'll be getting to communities and evaluating conformance with the state minimum thresholds. And now there is a new state threshold for all communities. So that's really, I think what I was trying to thread here was you could go with the ERAF list, noting that it's not, noting where it's perhaps insufficient in some areas. You could defer to a new list that's going to be created. What does A&R feel most comfortable with? If that makes sense, Janet.
Yeah, I mean, they do have new responsibilities to administer statewide minimum standards. But the rollout on that is a few years out. So in the interim, it seems to me like ERAF, you know, ERAF standing is a good substitute. And I mean, I'm just guessing that there isn't, there aren't going to be many applications for Tier 1A status from municipalities that don't already have these in place.
Understood.
Alex,
I just want to support Sarah's proposal in terms of how to move forward. I'd like to hear from A&R first. I don't have any faith that the ERAF list is up to date, applicable, worthwhile. So if A&R says it is, then I'm happy. If they don't, then I'm happy to defer to them. I think it's really important that we understand how few Tier 1A applications we are going to receive. So I don't think that there are going to be substantial burdens placed on A&R if, as a sister agency, we ask them once in a while about this particular community's regs. The other thing is that we just need to make sure that we word this guidance such that either the community has regulations that cover the whole municipality per the statute for flood hazard and river corridor, or there is comparable state regulations that accomplish the same thing, right? Because the river corridor regulatory process is going to flip, and it's no longer going to be in municipalities' hands as of 2026 and rolling through into 2028. So we just anticipate that in the wording. That's all.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where I was trying to go with it, is realizing that we do have this ERAF list. There's going to be more information coming on this, as well as more standards, and to provide that flexibility. But I really think that A&R needs to hopefully help us weave this and create something that's flexible enough to recognize the here and now, and also where they're going to be headed. So we'll wait to hear a little bit more on that, but I think just firmly what I heard from the board is that a self-certification where a community basically says, yep, we've got that, is not going to be sufficient. Kirsten?
Yeah, I was just gonna say too, that I'm interested to hear what A&R suggests, but if A&R returns and says, you know, we don't have this now, but here's what we would recommend you do now, and a year from now, we think we'll be in good shape, and we, you know, we would be looking for this. We can always change the, you know, update our guidance. Like, that's just another avenue. Like, we, you know, I think we
Right, it's not
might
like
get
the
a little
rules.
hung up on worrying about future hypotheticals. Like, I like the idea of flexibility, but that's just also something to bear in mind.
I'm going to move on to D. And I'll let you know that, so this is that they've adopted permanent zoning and subdivisions that do not have broad exemptions. And again, I think I offered two possibilities. The self-certification not to go with, and said that we will ask for acceptable evidence could be submitted copies of the current adopted zoning and subdivision regulations for the municipality, referencing any specified exemptions as separate cover letter. I'm seeing head nods, thumbs. I'm going to keep moving, but we can come back, because E is where we really start to get into some changes since last time, and I'd like to get some more reads off of you on this. So this is the requirement that the applicant has permanent land development regulations for Tier 1A area that further the smart growth principles of 24 VSA Chapter 76A, adequately regulate the physical form and scale of development, provide reasonable provisions for a portion of the areas with sewer and water, and allow for at least 4 stories, and conform to the guidelines established by the board. This is a little bit of a kitchen sink type one, with the guidelines established by the board as being all others that we choose to put in. So I'm going to sort of frame this up a little bit, and I want to have some targeted viewpoints from the board on this. So the Smart Growth Principles of 24 VSA Chapter 76A have a sunset horizon now, where several years from now, that portion will cease to exist. And I believe it's Chapter 139 that replaces it, that does not mention Smart Growth Principles. The Smart Growth Principles contain
We
I
just
just lost
lost.
Sarah. Did anyone else lose
Sarah.
Sarah?
I
I'm here.
lost Sarah as
Yeah.
well.
Sarah, can you
she's
hear
back.
us?
Yes.
Oh, you're back.
All right. I've stopped sharing. Is that better?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. I'm still seeing myself as being a little bit choppy, but I stopped sharing and I don't think I'm going to go back to sharing. I can just sort of verbally go through. I think each one of you has that document that we could follow along with, or maybe somebody else could share. I apologize for the lag time.
I can share it.
So I think what I was walking through was under E, what I had last time and what was envisioned. There was a lot of references to the neighborhood process that the downtown board and now the community investment board had. And that was a series of checklists. And there were 8 criteria for built environment and 8 criteria for complete streets. And you had to get 80% on both of the checklists in order to get conformance. And so that was sort of was envisioned for the neighborhood process, and perhaps envisioned for this process for evaluating. And it seemed to be a very nice checklist. But I think Alex brought up a very valid point of, should we try and make use of what is in statute already and not create a new checklist rather than what's in statute? So I did some hunting, and under section 4414, there was some language which seemed to include a reference back to 76A, as well as some smart growth principles. It doesn't specifically say smart growth, but I wanted to bring this to you and float this idea and show you what was in 4414 as perhaps creating a narrative for it. So again, this is sort of like a happy medium. It's not the smart growth principles of 76A, which are very large and aspirational. It's not the detailed checklist that neighborhoods had, but I think it might accomplish both. So what's in 4414, and I tailored this a little bit to be like a list for being able to compare. The first is compact settlement oriented toward pedestrian activity, including identifiable center, consistently high densities. So this goes to sort of that smart growth as well as the form and scale. Provides for a variety of housing types, shopping services, public facilities, public buildings interwoven within the district within close proximity. This is a smart growth criteria, I would argue. And I think the idea there, as I said, some of the complete street stuff creates patterns of interconnecting streets and blocks consistent with historic settlement patterns, provides for coordinated transportation system, hierarchy of appropriately designed facilities, head bike, public transit, automotive vehicles, and also the incorporated open space of the neighborhood, compatible greens and squares. I think that those are all sort of things that are representational in the checklist as well as in 76A. And then the last few are provides under number 6 on the next page, provides for public buildings, open spaces, other visual features, landmarks, ensures compatibility of buildings with other improvements, arrangement, bulk, form, design, character, landscaping, provides for public and private buildings with a form consistent, distinct edge. And also, I added in the core of Tier 1A shall allow for a minimum of 4-story buildings and then tried to define 4 stories. So again, this was a direction that sort of split the two between 76A and the neighborhoods checklist. Kirsten, I know you have your hand up. I'm looking for general at this point, more so than anything else in terms of, is this an acceptable direction to go in? Do people feel very strongly we should be going just to 76A or just the neighborhood checklist? Thoughts? Kirsten?
Oh,
Go ahead, Janet.
I just wonder if we should have our legal team look at that and weigh in on that question. Whether it would be appropriate for us to pick something in statute that references 76A, but that actually isn't there when our statutory reference is to go to 76A. Does that make sense?
It does. I think that with the neighborhood designation process, there's something similar, and they developed their own checklist. So I'm happy to work with one of our legal team on this, but I would say that the interpretation that the downtown board made was that they could go with something separate than just 76A. But I think happy to do that. Janet, I don't know if you have any general feelings about one or the other.
I think just because there are a few things in here, for instance, interconnecting streets and blocks that aren't possible in all, you know, I don't know how many that would be looking for Tier 1A that this isn't possible, but because of topography, that you don't see a lot of blocks in some municipalities that might be seeking Tier 1A status. And so I think that what was helpful about that for the community investment program was that, you know, you could have 8 out of 10 or whatever. But I think it makes sense to have a conversation with our legal team about it before we make a final decision. And so, Kirsten, go ahead. I jumped in before you.
That's okay. I'm just, I'm wondering, I would be interested to hear from legal too, but I'm also wondering, is there another entity that is looking at the municipal regulations to verify its, you know, how it aligns with the 24 VSA Chapter 76A? I'm just wondering if that is occurring elsewhere in
Just
the system.
The Community Investment Board after we make the map determination. I mean, but we need to make the map determination before it goes to them. So it
Okay.
used to be them. It
I know,
used
so
to be
that-
them, and now it's us.
Okay, so that hence
Yeah.
the importance of the specificity of the guideline to do this verification component. Yeah, and I guess I don't, because I haven't been working specifically in this, like at this level of detail with planning, and I'm wondering, for instance, like the public transit piece, if that's looked at on a kind of more generalized basis within the area under consideration. and if that, this feels like a definitive checklist of things that must be satisfied. And I think it's so fundamental. I guess I'd love to hear more from the three planners here too. The last item about the 4-story building height, shall allow for minimum of 4-story buildings. Minimum building height shall be inclusive of occupiable below grade stories and top stories in which the majority of the floor area is occupiable. I think I'm a bit hung up on the word building height. It's what I think what you're getting at, Sarah, is as to whether or not that particular floor would count as one of the 4 stories. And I would
Yes.
suggest a minor rewording to clarify what I think is meant here.
Yes.
Well, I think what Sarah's got there though is statute. So she wouldn't be quantifying that.
So that is the statutory language from the smart growth.
No.
It's from an adjacent part of statute, but it's statutory language, right?
It says minimum building height.
So that one was one that I created and I added.
Oh, okay.
To get at the requirement that is in statute about the 4 stories within the Tier 1A area. The Tier 1A area has to accommodate development that has a minimum of 4 stories. And I was trying to give some flesh on the bone to how we're going to evaluate stories.
That's what I thought.
Okay.
So you would allow that.
Kirsten, that could use some better wording. I'm happy to. And if you have some language, please feel free to pass on. I think what I'd like to do is to take this offline a little bit, but I think what I would like to do is come back to which I just shared on the screen, which was in the previous draft.
Oh, right.
Which is not in statute. This is existing guidance Community Investment Board was utilizing for neighborhoods, which was envisioned to solve this criteria, and have a checklist. And I inserted and said 8 out of 10. And I think the previous board conversation was, should we just refer back to 76A? 76A, as I said, is very aspirational, and it's hard to, need to be a lot of interpretive work about whether or not the regulations meet the aspirational principles contained within 76A about smart growth. And I was trying to make as many clear checklists as possible. So I pulled back, went in a different direction. I think what I would like to evaluate with the legal team is 2 options. The first is to go with the 76A language, the smart growth aspirational principles, or this checklist. And again, I think in applying 76A before, the Community Investment Board was successfully able to go with the checklist. So I would hope that would still be feasible for us to utilize.
Right. And they're still using this until through the end of next year, right?
Correct.
Alex.
So Sarah, to your first question, the overall structure, I like it. I like it a lot better than the checklist from the Neighborhood Development Area Program that was in the earlier draft. So kudos. I actually do think that this statutory reference to 24 VSA 4414 subsection 1 subsection A is the better statutory reference. I know per Janet's concern that, what we're charged with is smart growth principles of a different chapter, 76A, but I would encourage everybody to go read. It's not much. So just go read the 2. And I think, like Sarah said, you will find that this section that she's proposing, which is 4414 1A, refers to the other section. And it's not going to disappear like 76A is scheduled to. Granted, 76A will be around until 2034, so it's not for a long time, but it is scheduled to be repealed. This 4414-1A is not. And I totally agree, having looked at them side by side, that this is way more applicable to a tier 1A area. Chapter 76A, as Sarah said, is aspirational, but it's also looking at the entire municipality and how it's trying to do smart growth, not just in the places that are designed for development, which is the tier 1A areas, but overall. And I don't think that's our charge, even though it says 76A in statute. I think our charge for a tier 1A area is to ascertain whether there are land use regulations that adequately govern development within the tier 1A area. And that should be our focus, is the tier 1A area. And 4414-1A nails it. I mean, it again, I encourage you to read the two sections of statute to see. So anyways, that's a wholehearted endorsement. I like this instead of the checklist. On the specificity side of things, Sarah, the preface sentence says applicants must state how they meet each requirement of 24 VSA section 4414. I would change that to say applicants must state how they address each objective of 24 VSA 4414 subsection 1, subsection A, because those are objectives in that section of statute. They are not requirements. And like Janet said, I could see some communities who would be able to make a very compelling argument that they do meet those objectives, even if they fall down on one of them. Do you know what I'm saying? There could be an example like in the public transportation realm, or in the interconnected streets with blocks and such, that we would still see this as very much compatible and appropriate for a tier 1A designation. So anyways, that's a little specificity on wording.
Well, nope, could you give that back to me? So it's right here, this highlighted section. What can I,
Yes,
You
so
had-
in that section,
Yep.
it should, I think it should read, applicants must state how, hold on. Applicants must state how they address, not meet, address each objective, not requirement, objective of 24 VSA section 4414, subsection 1, subsection A. Add those subsections, because 4414 talks about a whole lot more, and we're just interested in 1A for this conversation. The only other specific thing I was hung up on was the same thing Kirsten was talking about with regard to the 4-story buildings. And because this is problematic, I believe, I think we should defer to the statutory language as much as possible in this particular case. So rather than saying the core of the tier 1A area shall allow for a minimum of 4-story buildings, I would say a portion of the tier 1A area. That's what the statute says. It leaves it sort of to our discretion as to what a portion of means. And I don't think the word core clarifies that enough to use a different word. I would also
Right,
say,
it could
sorry.
be problematic. Somebody might think, if, one end of it rather than the middle of it meets that, then shouldn't it still, yeah.
Right. One
Sarah,
more thing, Janet,
Oh,
just
go
one more thing. This section of statute says that the municipality has to have reasonable provision to allow for 4 stories. So I just want to go on the record by saying it may not be in our guidance, but if a municipality comes forward and says, we do have a reasonable provision that allows for it, but it requires a bonus, like the developer has to do something beyond our minimum requirements, I would be inclined to say that meets the intent of the statute, not that it's a by right allowance for 4-story buildings. I think, again, the statutory language is important to reference, which is a reasonable provision for. As for your definition of what a 4-story building is, I totally appreciate what you're trying to do there. And I hope that, we can move in that direction. I think just to be clear and honest about it, I imagine some legislators may have thought that 4 stories was above the ground as opposed to basement levels. But it doesn't stipulate that, and I think more flexibility is a good idea. So I like what you've done there.
Does statute address a definition for 4 stories in didn't the Home Act look at that? Or did it not? I thought it
It con-
required,
It contemplated a required density bonus for affordable housing projects in that they could add an additional story
to
beyond
what
whatever
was
the,
otherwise, yeah. But
right.
it didn't define story?
I don't
Okay.
think so, but this would
Okay.
be a good challenge for our legal team. Rebecca, if you're helping, or Jenny, I guess, if you're helping Sarah with this, maybe a quick check into statute as to whether there's a definition of a story for building purposes anywhere in statute.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep, we can do that.
Sarah, this is just mechanics of this. You had a number 5 that didn't have a carriage return, and then you erased the 5. Do you want to renumber these, or
Okay,
you had 5 in front of the 2, right? And
right.
so maybe that
So
was a separate,
I was wondering, I was fixing
Yeah.
that. Okay.
okay.
Yep. So I'm going to take this offline. I'm going to clean this up with legal. I'll work with Jenny and Rebecca and also Allison to see who wants this, recognizing everybody has a lot on their plate. And Kirsten, I think I know what you're getting at, but I see that you just shot me an email for the 4 stories, so I'm happy to look at that too. But hopefully what I'll do is I'll bring this back fully cooked with everything for the 21st. Just a couple more things to get through.
So I just want to acknowledge that we're going to be about 15 minutes over on this. And that's okay, I think. And Brooke, do you want to wait until Sarah's done, or do you have something you'd like to ask now or say now?
I just have some corrections to the document that I'll send her in terms of, so that she can deal with it, by email. I think it'll be easier.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Thank you,
Go ahead,
Brooke.
Sarah.
All right, so F, again, we were thinking that there's another one that needed. I want to hear what the SHPO has to say. G, again, A&R, I'm looking to weigh in on this. And come back with, what I will say with H, under the public water, wastewater, is in working through with Janet, she had some different language. We're using basically the same citation, but different language for this Natural Resource Conservation Service soil suitability. I'm going to amend this to go with the more succinct citation that she has. I think what we had sort of gone to consensus was to provide a narrative of how the community will staff. Oh wait, sorry, I apologize. I skipped on to I. For H, this needs to be a narrative saying more clearly where the community's at. Kirsten, before the meeting, shot me sort of a list of basic things that we can ask for, perhaps with the application. That I would agree. We should ask them for, has this project gone to design? I think there are some leading questions that we can ask with that. I don't know, Kirsten, I'd like to look at those a little bit more and see if those are things that are better put into the actual application versus this document. We can maybe give some for instances. I think that might be a good way to go, but I'll skip to where I was going on I, and with municipal staffing. I think this is another area that is sort of evolving, and again, I think where it looks like we might be settling is to have communities provide a narrative noting how the community will staff the Tier 1A with availability and qualifications of staff. There are a whole bunch of other things I didn't get to last time about what maps to submit. And I'm happy to take any comments on those. The last thing that I did want to hit on is just in terms of a process question. And also getting affirmation from the board is within this whole process, we had the ability to, in a pre-application process, meet with the applicants and say, you know, what sort of an application you have and give them feedback. What I think we should probably use the application process for is to also encourage the applicants to seek comments from the statutory parties listed prior to formally submitting for us. There are rather amorphous lists of people that they have to notify, including special groups within their community, NGOs, non-government organization type organizations that not all communities might look different in different communities. And so really, I think as part of a pre-application process, stressing to the applicants that they will be required to notify these entities later in the process. They would do best to engage and work with them early on in the process. And I think then I just sort of wrap this up by saying we're going to need to work with applicants and staffs once these are approved. And I'll mention that there's a whole separate process than this in terms of how we develop the actual application, the documents that will go out to applicants in terms of saying complete application received, notifications, how this goes into our permit system Kronos. So there's a whole lot that's not here that's also going to need to happen that we are going to start working on. But the sort of thing that needs to drive this is this guidance doc. So happy to take some of this offline, realizing that we're over on time. I very much appreciate all of your very thorough and thoughtful comments because I do want to get this to a point where on the 21st, I bring it back and the expectation is we'll have a working draft of this. And then as we start to get through all those other documents that are going to be necessary to facilitate this process, and perhaps more towards July, bring back to the board that final guidance doc for the formal set in stone approval from the board before we start to need to receive applications. But again, sort of looking at this within the larger trajectory of getting something that we can use to further the process, begin the process with the other documents and applications that need to happen, and use that to inform that final guidance doc, hopefully in July. So April 21st, then July, those are the milestones that I'm hopefully going to be looking for.
Thank you, Sarah. Kirsten.
Just quickly, I think that the forms that the applicants will use are so fundamental to this process that I hope that the board will also have an opportunity for input on those in some manner. Because this guidance document kind of, to me, where this memo is just outlining the basic elements, but it's not getting into that like structure and refinement of how it's delivered for use. So in the form of an actual like application form or instructions. So I'm just kind of wondering what everyone had envisioned, how that would be advanced to the finish line.
Sorry,
So
my microphone was off. Go ahead,
That's all right.
Sarah.
So what you aren't seeing is Alex Pastor and Rachel began work on these swim lanes and detailed Excel spreadsheets behind the scenes that list all the different things that need to happen, which Kirsten, given your insight within Act 250, your mind's going to that of how do you formulate this to go in Kronos? Are there any need to be changes to Kronos? There's legal team that's going to need to be involved in the applications too. So there's a whole thought process already behind all of that. And I would say it's not we have so many things to get through that the envision is we're not going to bring each form to the board, but there is going to be a heavy staff involvement and legal involvement in creating those. I think maybe we could talk about as a board when we sort of get through the sort of prioritization of all that we have to get through of what we want to see and when, if there's different aspects of it. But we are thinking through that this is going to be a big lift to get all those little detailed things in line, and that those are going to be highly impactful to the whole process and making it seamless.
Alex.
To put my spin on your question, Kirsten, my vision for the application form is that it's minimal. So I know Sarah's deep in it and with Alex Pastor and Rachel and such, and whatever needs to happen on the back end needs to happen. But as somebody who came from a municipal environment, this better not be an Act 250 application, right? This better be something very simple, where somebody can submit a cover letter to address the criteria and, some basic information about the name of the municipality and, attached maps. And that's what I'm looking for.
Sarah.
The other thing I'll just say is learning the state process and having a great appreciation for the things that I think that Kirsten has her hat on with all the experience for is what I think we're looking to do to begin is to take these applications in, perhaps in a PDF form or other form. And then once we know that we've nailed it, then look to make changes to Kronos with ADS and what have you, realizing that once you start to tinker with some of these systems and databases, it can be a lot, and also the cost element of employing ADS to make changes. So I think what we're looking to do is, as we begin these new processes, to put them together in a way that will also enable us to be adaptive and nail it down before we go and make changes to these larger databases. So to your extent, Alex, just by nature of where we're going, this can't be something that you go in and you type into the Kronos database necessarily to begin with and apply through the Act 250 process. We're going to be taking these things in, and staff are going to be sort of inputting the first few themselves into the system, which does create some unfortunate duplicativity to the process. But we want to make sure that we go about this in a thoughtful way that's going to work. So I hear the both of you, and hopefully we're doing everything that we can do to satisfy both.
Okay. We have now discussion and possible action on appeals enforcement and attorney-client memoranda. And I believe, Jenny, we do have some updates from the legal team that you would like to provide us. Is that true?
Certainly, we can do that. We don't have any points of decision for you today, but I can orient you on some of the materials we sent earlier this week.
Okay. Do we have a motion to enter into executive session for that?
I can make the motion, but I just want to ensure that we actually need to be in executive session. Jenny, can you tell us whether you think we need to be?
Well, the documents that I shared with you are subject to attorney-client privilege. So if you had any questions about them, I'd rather do so in executive session.
Okay. Janet, I'm happy to make the motion, but I do notice that Annette Smith has got her hand up, so perhaps you would recognize her first.
I saw that. Annette, go ahead.
Yes, your agenda has public comment near the beginning for non-agenda items, but you don't seem to put anything on for agenda items. So how do you want to handle that?
So we were pretty over time on that agenda item. If you have comments, I wonder if you can send them to Sarah offline, just because we're trying to.
Sure, I have comments on all three of the topics you talked about today.
Oh, okay. Actually, go ahead, Annette. Why don't you just,
They're short. So on
okay,
the removal for cause document, I found one that is also for the Cannabis Control Board. It's very similar to the one that you found for Green Mountain Care Board, but it's not marked as draft. There are two
Hmm.
items in there that I wanted to flag. You added a line under cause for removal, but if already existing is violations of Vermont personnel policies and procedures, just make sure that's not redundant, because I don't know what's in those, but I suspect that there's something. And then in both of those draft documents, there is something that I wondered about under 7.304 alternatives for removal. And they both have in various ways suspension without pay, which struck me as pretty draconian. And I just want you to consider that whether or not, I mean, you're going to leave somebody on, but you're not going to pay them. Is that a policy you really want to put in place? On the Robert's Rules of Order document or your rules, I haven't seen anything of that posted, but in looking at the search I did for small board Robert's Rules of Order, one of the items that seems to be somewhat inconsistent is whether or not a motion requires a second. So I would suggest that I think that the document Brooke showed had a motion requiring a second, but in a lot of the summary Robert's Rules of Order for small boards, it doesn't. So I would hope that you would have one. And an issue that has happened in my town that I hope you will clarify in your rules, and I couldn't tell quickly if it was in what Brooke put up, was if you're going to vote, like you have on your agenda, possible action, that it should be warned in advance on the agenda. We've had numerous instances in my town with its select board where they actually don't put anything on the agenda and they spend lots of money at the end of the meeting, and they don't even tell their members that they're going to be voting on something. So it's for your benefit as well as the public's benefit that it needs to be notified in advance whether or not what's up for discussion is also intended for a vote. On the Tier 1A scope, I have a couple of minor typo things. In a couple of places, it says criteria on page 2. It's a singular, so it should be criterion. On page 1, it references, and I realized that I was looking at a document that you posted, but I think you were looking at something that was a little further along. But at the beginning on page 1, it refers to Tier 1B, but it doesn't give any context, but then you do talk about it below. So I think you should add the Tier 1A application criteria builds off the Tier 1B process, see below, so that you know that you're going to be talking about it further on. On page 5, number 3, there's reference to the National and State Historic Register or state registers, but neither of them have the word historic in them, and that should be in there. At your meeting in Rutland, Chris Campany talked about mapping that's being done by the Wyndham Regional Commission. So I wonder if on page 5, you want to put in some reference to the Vermont wastewater infrastructure mapping. It's not ready yet, but it's going to be ready in a while. And those are my primary comments.
thank you. Annette, will you can you share your comments on the Tier 1A with Sarah via email?
Yes, I will. I think I might have had some other ones that I haven't called out,
Okay.
but.
And then the piece that Brooke put on screen, she's going to provide to Maddie, and Maddie will put that on our website as a meeting document.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, thanks to Maddie for getting me to use a different browser that is working.
Great. Glad it's working. Thank you, Maddie. All right, back to a motion for moving to go into executive session.
Right, I'll make that motion. So it appears that the board needs to discuss pending Act 250 appeals and enforcement actions, and to have confidential attorney-client communications on these matters As a result, I move that we find that premature public knowledge of these matters would place the board at a substantial disadvantage and that the board enter executive session.
I'll second that. This is
Thank
Barb.
you. And just for Annette and Thomas, we don't anticipate making any decisions in this executive session and will come out merely to adjourn. Just, you can stick around if you like, but I didn't want you to have to if you didn't want to. Okay, see you in the other room.
Okay.
Maddie, can you hear me?
This is the wrong meeting.
No,
This is still
no,
the
it's
public
not.
meeting.
No, we forgot to vote. I forgot to have a vote. So,
Got
we
it.
had a
Okay, great.
motion.
Yep.
It was
We're still
seconded,
here.
and then I said bye, everybody, before we even voted. So all those in favor, please say aye.
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 I
Aye.
see 5 hands and I heard 5 ayes. So we will see you shortly.
Thank you.
Okay, here we all are. And we are recording, correct, Maddie?
Yep, you're good.
Okey doke, we are back from executive session, having taken no action. And there is nothing left on our agenda. So,
I move we adjourn.
thank you. We have a second.
Second.
Brooke, thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That's 5 ayes. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. See you soon.